All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again on the podcast. If anyone's wondering why I'm looking off to the side, it's because my monitor is there so that I could speak to Ignacio. But I'm here with Ignacio today. He's a symbolist and a Catholic from Chile, if I'm not mistaken. And he kind of speaks to these things a lot on X. I interviewed Cameron Dixon before on the channel, and he recommended I speak to him. So I'm really looking forward to have a symbolic conversation with another fellow Catholic and see where it goes to. So welcome, Ignacio, and thank you for coming on my channel.
No, thank you very much for the invite. I'm usually in the Spanish-speaking circles a lot, but not in the English-speaking circle. So it's pretty fun to be here.
Yeah. So how did you get into symbolism, and why do you think it's important?
Well, it's a weird thing. I can't really pinpoint an actual moment in which I was like, oh my God, I care about symbolism. I always cared about art, and I always cared about just, contemplating certain things in life, and a bit of a natural philosopher, natural born kind of thinker and stuff like that. And but then in specific, things of looking at certain symbols and trying to see what the meaning is and all of that. It started because when I was searching for God, when I was a teenager, I started going through a bunch of different paths. I went to, I became a Sufi Muslim. I became a Rosicrucian, all of that. And everybody has those little, Sufism is more the mystical side of Islam. So it's very involved with symbolic language and symbolic way of speaking about things. It's not, you're not going to convince a Sufi Muslim to not be Muslim by just simply just saying words to them, oh, this doctrine, whatever. They don't care because they are seeing it through a symbolic lens. And the same with occultist people like the Rosicrucians and stuff like that. But then, of course, I didn't find all the things that I was looking for in my life, like my personal experience, my personal situation. And actually, things went south, pretty bad after being with the Rosicrucians. So I was like, okay, this is there's some weird things in here that I don't like. But I was still interested in all the symbols because I see them everywhere. I saw them at church. That's how they trick you actually into their weird sects, is that they go, oh, you used to be a Catholic when you were younger? Oh yeah, we do the same thing. Do you see the all-seeing eye? You have that in many cathedrals, and we know the symbolism of it. We know what is behind it. So that's how they tricked you, and that's how they tricked me. But then I found out that, well, I became a Catholic afterwards because of my conversion and everything, but my reconversion to Catholicism. And then I started finding out that there was Catholic symbolists like Jean Hani or Jean Ani and Jean Borela and people like that, and I was like, oh my God, you have a Catholic way of seeing this, and there's a whole a mystical tradition. And then and then I found out about Jonathan Pajot and Mathieu Pajot and all that circle, and René Guénon and all of those things that come about afterwards, perennialism, whatever. But I stayed a Catholic. I just wanted to be I want to know if this can be understood through a Catholic lens, because in Catholicism you don't have much of symbolist speaking or symbolism kind of language. Whenever anybody's defending the faith, is only through just doctrine and words, and
this is what rationality.
It's
rationality.
Absolutely. So yeah, that would be my initiation into symbolism.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because I have a similar feeling. I feel, especially in the Roman Catholic side of things, so the Western side of the mind, Yeah, it's become very rational. Where if I mention anything of like Saint Mergen, the mermaid saint, I've talked about her on the channel too. It's like, well, she's not real, so it's just like, medieval hocus pocus in the past, which is really interesting that you would throw away your like certain traditions that kind of like built up where you are today. And so, do you think there's a possibility of bringing back that symbolic language, or kind of like, because it seems like because of historically like the Enlightenment and the rational movement throughout the West, and eventually the Jesuits, I know, went through like the calendar, and if they couldn't find any historical evidence of a particular saint, they kind of like got rid of them off the calendar. So like Saint Christopher, Saint Morgan, and things like that. Do you think there's a possibility for, I guess, like something like a renaissance or something of bringing that kind of language back? Or what is your opinion on that?
I mean, there is a possibility, but it's the one thing that I've been criticizing for a while pretty much in every circle that I've been through, like even within the symbolic like groupings, like all the groups that surround the symbolist culture kind of thing, like this modern trying to re-enchant reality kind of thing, like this little corner of the internet. And everybody seems to not understand that to recover that, we need to recover Earth. We need to go back to nature. And some people fight against that. Like people go like, oh, I know somebody that lives in nature and they're not that smart, or they're not that bright, or they don't understand metaphysics, or they don't understand Catholic theology. So living in the woods is not going to make you more, symbolically savvy or theologically savvy. And it's like, it's this weird dichotomic way of thinking. It's like dichotomous way of thinking. It's like, it's either you live in the woods and you're like those like prehistoric men, or you don't live in the woods and you don't pay attention to nature at all, and you just read books, because that's what we do. We are civilized people, so we read books of academics and scholars, and and that's what we do. We're not like those cavemen, But in order for symbolism to come back, we need to go back to being more in nature, like living the rhythms of nature. Because at the basis of symbolism, at the very basis of all the symbolic structures and the symbolic meanings and all of that, at the very core and the most base level, you have reality. Like, you can't talk about a unicorn if you don't have horses, if you don't have horns. You just can't. You can't, like, you can't make sense of a parable, for example. When the Lord speaks in parables, how are you going to make sense of them? He's always speaking about nature. He's always speaking about something in nature, even when he does certain things. Like, he heals people, he spits on dirt, on soil, and then he places soil on your eyes. Like, what is that? The only explanation you can find from a more rationalistic understanding is like, yep, that's a supernatural thing. You have the natural, and then you have the supernatural. You're just saying there's something above the natural. That's what super means. It's above. So there's natural, and then you have something on top. So now it's the on top thing that is working. So yeah, but the natural part was not eliminated. He actually used actual soil, an actual spit, and he spoke of an actual vine, and actual grapes, and actual wheat. Like, he's like, not because the supernatural came about, then you destroy the natural. That's not even Catholic theology. We don't think grace and the supernatural destroys nature. Like, so, but if we're not,
and Christ himself took on matter, right? Like, he does like, even like you're saying, he actually spit and stuff, but in order to do that, he also actually existed in the world. Like, he took on our flesh and lived the body. So yeah, I completely get what you're saying for sure. Um, did you have anything else that you wanted to get? I know I kind of broke your train of
Yeah,
thought.
yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's very frustrating because we want to get into meaning making, like there's this whole semiotic school of thought, that they study all how the signs work and how the intellect works and like how we come about new signs and new meanings and new words and like all this crazy relational web of things and how they come about to mean something to us. That image of the Sacred Heart of Christ, it's like a heart with the crowns of thorns, but that was composed by somebody. And if I show that to somebody in the Amazon, he's not going to know what that means. He's not going to know like the cross is because the cross of Christ and the thorns is because the crown of thorns. And like, he's going to have to know all the crazy web of connections in order to understand that. But here's the crazy thing is that if that person from the Amazon knows what a heart is, if he knows what fire is, and he has experience with fire, and he has experience with thorns, and and he understands that what crossing means, in practice, like he is like, oh, do you want to put it up a house? Yeah. Well, you stick something in the ground, you make a cross. That's how you make something stand up. You cross certain things and you cross bridges and you cross like structures and you make that cross. So if you are embedded within certain reality in which you experience those things and you're close to that, it's not going to be that hard for me to just add one more relational aspect and the meaning is just going to click to them, which is what happened actually when the people from Spain came here. We had like millions of conversions, but what people don't know is what was the work of the missionaries, and they were doing exactly this. They were like connecting all those dots to them, and for them it just clicked because they had already the basis, the natural basis. The same with the Greeks, the same with the people in Europe, the natives from Europe, same thing. They had all that natural basis so that the Catholic understanding could flourish. But now we're just taking that out because we think that like we can just get rid of that. We already know the meaning. I have that. I have all the webs of meaningful relations. So I don't need an actual heart. I don't need actual fire. I don't need actual thorns. I can just go with the meaning. And I can do rationalistic understandings of symbols. I think that's very dangerous.
Yeah, it also that's something I've been kind of exploring is what you're talking about of like living like we're so used to almost living in the world of matter that it almost like flies across our heads like everything we interact with because we're always living almost above our, you can say we almost are living supernaturally where we're just living in our thoughts and we completely miss what we're interacting with every day. And so that's that what you're also saying is like when you live you can say naturally, and it's not even there's also this kind of taboo, I guess, of when Catholics think about living naturally or a Western person thinking about naturally of it being some kind of new age kind of thing. But the thing is like that if you live in that manner, even the liturgical calendar starts making sense to you of why we fast when we fast and why we do that, right? Like it
Absolutely.
completely coincides together with our bodies, right? And so you have all these diets, for example, like carnivore or vegan or whatever, and one of them could be they're kind of like shocks to the system because it's a lot of one thing. But something like fasting helps us to reset ourselves in the same way, like going into Lent helps us reset spiritually, but also bodily, because if you're eating, for example, less meat, it gives your body time to process everything. And then you can kind of like start anew again. And so, and then, now we live in such an abundant time, it doesn't make sense for you for like mating seasons of animals or like keeping track of livestock or whatever. So, there's a utilitarian aspect of it too. Like, it gives time to reset your flock and your crops too. But it's exactly what everything you're saying is. When you don't have a garden, when you're not farming, when you're not like working as a carpenter or building houses or something, you completely miss that, right? And that's why
Yeah.
you, for example, that's why you have examples of, for example, like a Protestant completely disconnecting themselves from like church versus what they do at a football stadium, right? Or
Absolutely.
like at a concert. Like, their worship looks like a concert, but then you ask, well, why when you go to see Lady Gaga or whoever, why isn't that worship? And it's
Yeah.
because they have this weird disconnect from reality, where it's just like, oh, it's because I'm just thinking rationally that that's for God and that's for something else. But it's like, yes, but the way you practice, you're also a body, and so the way you're
Yes.
interacting is also that, in that manner, right? So
Well,
it's really interesting what you're saying.
yeah, the issue is that we forget that we are composite beings, and we are a composite of something very specific, which is form and matter. So there's an like immaterial aspect to us, and there's a material aspect to us, and we are a composite of both, And symbols are just compositions. That's what a symbol is. A symbol is a composition. Any kind of composition, you can think of it as a symbol. This is why, like, when you want to understand why is it that fire signifies something, well, it's because it's united in some way, shape, or form to something else. So it's signifying something beyond itself, even though it's a material phenomena. That material phenomena is connected to many things. It's connected to burning because it actually burns. It's like, why is it connected with closeness, and why we like warm colors to feel at home? Like, because when you are like going outside into the cold, just go outside at night, how people used to do it, and now light up a fire and see what is it that's gonna happen. You're gonna gather around the fire. So you're gonna make your home that fire. You're gonna speak to people. You're gonna tell stories. You're gonna sing. It's gonna come naturally, because that's gonna be the side in which you can be warm, and that fire is gonna become the heart of your community. When you're cold, when you need food, when you need to cook, when you need to. So why is it that fire signifies all this web of things? Well, it's because it's actually capable of doing that. It's virtually there. The power is there. The potency to do it is there. The virtues to do it is there. But if you just disconnect from fire, because fire is like, what are you talking? Like fire, earth, air, and water? That like new agey elements thing, like, or that ancient way of seeing reality? It's like, well, yeah. Isn't your body made like mostly of water? Like water, like, yeah, we should pay attention to water and fire and earth, and air. Like, can you hold your breath for how long? Like, go ahead. Just don't have air. So all these things have actual capacities in the world, and they enter into a web of relationality with us through our intellects and senses and all of that. But we can't get rid of that aspect. Like you said, we take it for granted because we're trapped here, which symbolically is we're trapped in the air. We're trapped above, all the flying things, all the stars. We're just looking at the stars above here, the little thoughts, the intelligible species, in a Thomistic understanding. We're just looking at them and making connections between them, and making all these compositions up there, making symbols with air, and then we speak them out so they sound very clever, but
Yeah,
they don't
it's like,
mean anything.
Yeah. It's like what Jonathan Pajot says. Like we almost disconnect from ourselves from our body, and we become like these floating observers that
Yeah.
just look down on everything else, like as if we're disconnected from it. Um, you also mentioned, what you're mentioning about the fire and stuff is also um, goes into like imagery. So, I mean, one thing I would like to also say is, when you mention something like fire, it's not necessarily the fire, the image of fire itself that's the symbol. It's also what you're saying is like the pattern that revolves around fire of what it does, right? Like how it interacts with wood, how it interacts with our own bodies and stuff. So there's a pattern. So it's not like you just draw, it's not like you just draw water on something and it has meaning. That meaning, the only reason that has meaning is because how we know through our own experience with that water of how it interacts with everything else.
Yeah.
And so, you mentioned that image, for example, behind you, of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and like that. How do I like to say this? So there in the Western form, also there's this aspect where we also view art as something very arbitrary, right? Where as long as it looks pretty, like there's a beautiful Catholic teaching that art should lead to something true, good, and beautiful, right? And sometimes we hyper focus on kind of like the beautiful part, and we forget about the truth and the good. And so the beautiful image about the one you have, the Sacred Heart, is, and I spoke about this in the recent video, is that it's a pretty scandalous image because it's like the heart is always viewed, it's inside you, right? Like you were saying. And so, and it's always been like the center of a human being, right? Like it's the core of the human being. And so he's revealing as the bridegroom his very naked self, like on the inside. Right. And you have that whole pattern of a wedding when like a bride and a groom reveal each other before they, copulate for sex and things like that. And
Uh-huh.
and he's going beyond the flesh, right? He's showing like his soul. But then you have something like the Sistine Chapel, where you lose out on some of the imagery because, for example, the creation of Adam is like the touching of the fingers. You don't have that breath, right? And so when you have art that focuses too much on, I would say it's almost like on a lower form, like there's something pornographic about it underneath, where it's focusing too much on the passions, and so it skips out on the truth and the good. And so when we start forming our theology based on that touching of the finger, we lose out all meaning of what spirit means, right? Because of the breath that gave Adam life. And so any mention of wind or something beyond that, if you base your theology off of that image, you kind of lose out on it. Like it has almost no meaning because it's disconnected from creation. Do you have kind of a same view on the art form, and specifically about things like the Sistine Chapel, or do you have a little bit more nuance about that in terms of symbolism and imagery?
So the crazy thing with art is very tricky because in a way we need to understand that the church is always saving, in the like eschatological sense. So when you have a whole society of people going back into like classical culture and like Roman and Greek and all that thing that was going on at that time, like the rediscover of whatever thing. They thought it was a rediscovery, but but whatever. So people were starting to go in that direction. And the church, what is it that the church is trying to do? I would describe it as it's trying to act like Saint Paul. Saint Paul became like the Greeks. He became like a Jew. He became like a lawless man, to gain them, to win them over to Christ. So he became like them. And that's scandalous, Going, if anybody goes right now to the Amazon and goes, oh, that God, that unknown God, or that God that you call the 3 times worthy, like the Toltecs called Ometeotl, that God? That's actually the Holy Trinity. And you need to correct certain things, but I'm going to present you the Holy Trinity through Christ, because one of those persons actually came down to earth and blah, blah, blah. If anybody says that right now, it's going to feel scandalous. It's going to be like, why is he taking pagan imagery and pagan understandings to share the faith, you know? It's like, yeah, but that's what the church has been doing forever, since like the Bible, you know, like St. Paul was doing that. He was becoming like people to get them to win some to Christ. That's what he says in First Corinthians, I think it's 9, chapter 9, verses 19 to 22. Pretty sure. When he says that. And it's like, yeah, so the church should do that. Now the problem lies in the disconnection between symbolism. So let's say, okay, we're going to do a more outside hyper expressed version, you know. Let's say we're going to just become hyper realist. We're just going to go and touch on the senses of people, because that's where most people is, and we want to share the gospel to those people. That's fine, you know. It's a sacrifice. We need to understand that. It is a sacrifice. You are sacrificing something when you're doing that. Every time something is dying. When you go from Byzantine art to Renaissance art, you sacrifice something. And if you don't see it, that's just being blind, you know? So you're sacrificing something. But then what is it that you shouldn't sacrifice? Because it makes no sense to do it. It's traditional symbolism. Why is it that now is this thing? What is this thing? Then you have to come up with a very rationalistic, elaborate understanding. It's like, oh, it's just, God is coming to us, and we are not trying to reach him back, and like that's the classical understanding of what that means. Like, dude, the image is supposed to be the creation of Adam. When God took earth, put it together, and then he breathed forth into his nostrils. That's the image of Adam's creation. So this is not the image of Adam's creation. This can be the image of pride, you know. It can be the image of like certain things, you know. But you need to understand that relational framework of traditional symbolism to be able to become like the Greeks and not become a Greek, you know. just go full on pagan, like, oh, I want to become like the pagans. Yeah, that's fine, as long as you stay with certain things that make you not a pagan, you know, that don't turn you into a pagan. But then what ends up happening is that people don't have that balance, and they go the more pagan, you know. They become more pagan, they become more like, they stop being like them, they become them, you know. And then the Catholicism and the faith becomes this thing put on top of it. So it becomes, then our faith becomes superstitious. It's like you have nature, and on top of it, we add this thing, which is Catholic theology, which is, you know.
Yeah. It's similar also to, you know, it's, if you talk to somebody about, I know, you know, there's many Catholics that do take this seriously, but there's an aspect of it when you tell stories, for example, of witches or like witchcraft or things like that, people brush it off of like, oh, it's just like this fun fairy tale or whatever. But then reality hits you in the face, where like recently, even with the Charlie Kirk assassination, there's been information that's being released that witches did a curse on him, right? And so you have this reality then of something like witches or something hitting you in the face. And there's an aspect of what you said where you're just placing like theology on top of, you know, to kind of code it neatly in your rationalistic worldview, where when the medieval, you can say, or the, you know, the supernatural actually hits you in the face, there's an aspect of like, oh, what do we do with this, right? And so
Yeah.
especially in the Protestant world, right? Like you have this, oh, this is just, it's nothing, right? I'm doing this because I just think it's fun. But then it's like, well, why do it if it's just, there's a really big disconnect. It's almost even hard to talk about, because if you're saying that witches aren't real and their spells aren't real, but then you get upset when witches do spells and it happens to work, like which way, Western man? Like, like, it's that whole concept.
Yeah, so it's related with what I was speaking earlier. When you take away the ontology of participation, so symbolism for a traditional symbolist, like any traditional symbolist, he's going to tell you that the things are related to divine ideas. And a semiotician, he's going to criticize that. He's going to be like, what are you talking about? Meaning came about because of all this web of relations. Like, sure, but in order for me to use fire, for example, there at that symbol, I need to go back to actual fire. If not, that won't make sense here. Even I can put all the relational web of meaning, it won't make any sense. Even in Thomistic anthropology, of knowledge, you grasp things from your senses, external, then they come together in your internal senses and you make up images that are called phantasms. Then your intellect goes here and like makes it bright into the spiritual realm of your person, and then you can pick up on intelligible species, like those things that you can be like, oh, that's dog, that's cat, that's fire, whatever, that's water. And then once you have that mental verb or mental logos, you have that concept that you conceive, it's born, that word, then you check back with your senses. So you check it back with your imagination, you check it back with your phantasms, and then the process of knowledge is finished. So the process of knowledge it doesn't end with just the intellection, right? So you can't just be like, oh, I have that. No, you need to check back with reality, at least at the level of your senses. And I would say that the senses, the internal senses, also check back with my external experience. If you lose any of those things in the process, you're just going to lose what symbolism is about. And why is it that you have causal capacities of symbols? Because, okay, let's say fire. So fire was created, and there's a divine idea of fire, there's a divine idea of fire. God has an idea, an eternal idea of how he can be participated as fire. So he has a divine idea of what fire is. Fire is participating through a transcendental relation with God. God is creating the fire. He's sustaining the fire. He's giving its actuality at the most fundamental level. So there's a connection with the actual fire with God. And everything that fire has as a power, as a potency, as virtual things that are there that could happen, it could burn something, it could light up a place, it could, like, all these things that are there in the fire are there because God gave gave fire that capacity. And now once the fire has that capacity and it does the things that it does, then we can connect fire with all the meanings and all the patterns and all the things. And after that, we can make images like this one, or we can paint a house with fiery colors so it feels more warm, right? Mm-hmm. Even though the house could be cold, but just by looking at it, it brings back that fiery understanding of reality. So it's going to cause in me something real just by the virtue of the colors, because it's participating, it's united to all this other aspect of reality, right? So when you have somebody making and we're not even adding the capacity of angels to do things. Like, we're not even talking about that because that makes the whole thing a bit more crazy, But but we're just thinking at this level of like things having a capacity for something by participation, and how those things participate in us and we in them through this relation that we have with them, of relation of reason, relation of whatever kind of relation that we have. And those things can cause something. I can do certain sign on you and it's going to do something. I can take a cross and invert it, it's going to do something. I can make an image of a pentagram and invert it and put a goat face and put all these words and this weird, and it's going to cause something. It's going to do something. It's going to have an actual, like a capacity to do certain things. And when you put that in time, so if I add those symbols in a specific sequence in time, that's a ritual. And that if the symbol has a capacity, the ritual has a capacity too. And if I add that to me, if I put music to that, which is certain things separated by time, linked in a specific sequence, it's also going to have a capacity to do something. So once you put all those things together and you add on top of that angels, like demons and angels, then yeah, you can have witches do something real, and you can have healers that know all this symbolism, and they know all how reality works on that aspect, and they can also like heal people and do all these weird things that for us modern people, we think is just nonsense and superstitious.
Yeah, what's interesting also is the difference in the way we see, like, I'll say something like categories. And what I mean by that is when we think of a whale, we think of what we biologically know as a whale in a materialistic sense, right? Like what science has defined as a whale. But if you go back to, like, I would say like medieval period or ancient people, when they think of a whale, they think of a giant sea monster, essentially, right? And so if you're on a boat and you see this giant shadow go across you, what's going to come to you is going to be fear, even if that animal in itself is maybe harmless, right? But the fact of its massive size, it still brings about fear and the unknowingness of it. And so when you have stories, for example, of Jonah and the whale, you have this disconnect of the meaning of the story because everybody thinks of the biological meaning of a whale instead of a very large ominous thing that swallows you, right? And so, you have, for example, icons like Jonathan Pajot popularly has one where like the whale is swallowing Jonah and it looks more like a sea monster, has teeth and stuff. Whereas like a modern man today might draw something like an orca or a blue whale or something that's swallowing Jonah. And I feel there's some loss there. So I guess the question is, how do you consolidate something like scientific category versus symbolic category? And because it also affects our experience in the world too. So even like a dog, if I saw a jackal, to me that's still a dog, but like science might say like it doesn't fit in the category of dog, right? And so how do you kind of consolidate those things?
Well, the all this thing of like categories of species is very tricky actually. Because even within the science there's not an agreement. Like, what does it mean to be a tiger? What does it mean to be a cat? What does it mean to be like, all those categories? You have different systems that they put certain animals within a certain thing because they can mate. Some others put it because they live close together. Some other, like all the categorical system. It's not a set in stone kind of thing. You can check this out anywhere. Like it's not something like, yeah, this is the one system that everybody uses. Not at all. And now, but the problem is with the symbolic notion, which is, it's taking away your experience. That's pretty much what's happening. My kids, I have 3 little kids. When you turn off the lights in the house at night and you go, no more nothing, no more TV, no more lights, go to sleep. And you just shut all the lights off, they get scared. Like that's just something that happens to them. And you can light the house again back and say, it's the same house. Like, think. Don't be stupid, right? Think. It's the same house. I'm going to turn off the lights and it's not going to change. It doesn't matter. It did change. Now it's dark. Now I actually don't know what's happening. Like physically don't know. I just don't have an understanding of what's going on. It's dark. So of course, if you are like unable to pick up on things that are happening, that's going to be chaotic for you. It's going to be destabilizing for you. That's just the human experience of that. And you can try to reason your way into it, like you try to reason like, it's a whale. They don't do anything. They just go by you. That's it. Like, dude, do you see it? If you actually, did you feel it? You saw how it moved everything, how it moved our boat, how we could just fall into water and like just lose everything? Didn't you just sense that? No, I saw on this article that whales actually, that it means nothing. So yeah, of course, but that's the process of rationalizing things too much, which is what I appreciate about the fact that we still have certain traditions, Eastern Catholicism or Orthodoxy and like Ethiopian traditions and like Syriac tradition, that they hold on to these images and this imagery because they're like, yeah, we can change our approach to reach more people and be more universal in different ways, but I'm just gonna stick to this. I'm gonna preserve this, okay? You do your thing, you go be Michelangelo and do whatever, but I'm gonna hold on to this because I think this thing, it's doing a lot of things that your system can't do, that your model can't do, Like you said, modern art ends up killing everything. When I see like the Bibles, when I buy a Bible for my kids, I always look for certain traditional symbols. I always go like, oh my God, that's horrible image of the crucifixion. I'm not going to buy this Bible, and I just don't buy it. And then I check for something and it's like, there's this Bible that somebody gave it to us that in the creation story, everything's dark. And for some weird reason, instead of just putting what the Bible says, they give explanations, like as if they know what it means, with no recall to the church fathers or anything, just like their modern times intuition. And it's like, so God created the planet Earth. It's like it doesn't say that in the Bible. Why are you putting the planet Earth? Why are you embedding into me this new notion? And then you have this image of a hand that is like ghost-like. It's like a ghost-like image. Like, and I don't even know what it's doing. It's just there, like there's something spiritual, it's ghostly-like. It's ghost-like. And it's just horrible. It's destroying our faith and we don't even realize it. Once we get out of the system of the fairies, speaking about fairies and speaking about fairy tales and like all this understanding of reality, once we take it out, we start killing our faith. And our faith becomes a struggle which is rationalistic. So that's why you see a lot of crazy things going now with the apologetic realm. People are just losing it and they just trying to look at the magisterium, look at this book, look at this paper, like you need to understand that this is what he means, because when the Pope whatever said this and then the council of whatever, and it's like, dude, I can't, this is not my faith. I can't live like that.
Yeah,
I'm not a Protestant.
Some of those things would be easily explained. Like if you're trying to explain a parable or a teaching of a church father, it's like, go plant an apple tree, and then you'll understand what it means.
Absolutely.
Right? Like
that's what monks do.
Yeah, or just like go go try to make friends, like go try to make friends with like a wild animal, and you'll see what it means when it's talking about the passions. Like it's just like there's an aspect of um thinking versus living, right? Like there's an aspect where we should just be able to live. I'm not saying prudently. I'm not saying like when people hear that they automatically associate it with passions. But what I'm saying is like live in the world. Like you don't
Yeah,
have to know. You don't have to know this like the um scientific things of what an apple or the temperatures and stuff. It's like there's a tradition already around orchard planters and stuff. Just follow their tradition, plant the apple tree, and you'll get it. Like you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like you'll understand it. I
When I,
completely agree. Like the connecting all the councils and stuff like I think, once again, I don't want to like brush all of that aside, and I don't think
no, no,
that's what
no,
you're
not at
saying
all.
either. But it comes to a point where you're connecting all these dots, and where you look like that classic image of like with the red yarn connecting everything.
Yeah,
When it's very simple, like a lot of the monks and the church fathers, they explain things based on the world around them. It's why, for example, St. Patrick's teaching of the Trinity is so powerful, because he took what was in the environment in Ireland and what you said in the very beginning, used the nature of that to say, this is the Trinity. You see the clover? This is what it means. This is what it looks like. And so the people there probably they even probably had celebrations that already existed around the clover because it's such a unique plant. And so
yeah,
to take that and say this is the Trinity, now you've blessed them, right? Like you've taken their culture and baptized it, as people say. And I completely I completely agree with you with that whole, this whole culture of the apologetics, where it just becomes purely rational. And like you hear some of these people explain it, and it's like, man, you can just tell them to go outside.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
The thing is that I understand that you need that aspect of this is why I love Saint Thomas Aquinas, but I don't love many of the Thomistic people, and the Thomistic scholars, because they don't have what he had. He lived in like medieval Europe, so he was embedded in nature. He was embedded within certain traditions. He was embedded in certain practices. So when he speaks and he makes intellectual distinctions, he's not being disembodied from reality when he does that. So if you read St. Thomas Aquinas thinking of him as a mystic, you're like, yeah, makes sense. He's just making a distinction. That's all he's doing. He's not separating reality. But now the usual Thomistic person, he's disconnecting from reality. He's becoming this guy that reads books, that can quote mine all the Summa Theologiae and all the Summa Contra Gentiles. Like he can just quote mine the Bible and everything, just throw quotes at you and shoot them at you because and it's like, dude, I don't even know what you're doing. Like I don't understand how is that supposed to help me in my holiness and in my path in my life, where I encounter darkness, where I encounter fear and certain patterns, and I like I'm living this actual reality. Like, how are you helping me? You should connect those high principles with embodied actual things. You should bring them down to earth. And now it's going to make sense. That's why you have a cathedral, like a Gothic cathedral, that takes high level, complex, intellectual level things, and they put it together and bring it down into an actual building that you can walk on, and you
mhm.
can look at the things, and you can be like, that's where the sun comes from. That's where the light goes to. That's like, we are having this feast today. This is why the sun is hitting the altar today, and we have a saint from the north side of the church. Why? Because from the north, you have the crazy people coming and doing the things, like all of that. That's the part that we're missing out. We're just missing it out. And then, like I said, It's not that it's not important to have those principles and counsels and everything, but they should be grounded in reality. Like I said, when with St. Thomas Aquinas, he said knowledge ends up in your phantasm. So in your internal senses, material aspect of you. That's where it finishes. So you have the intellectual thing, and then it comes down to earth. And it's like, it sits there. It sits on the earth. It sits on a stool, on a wooden stool, you know? It
Yeah,
sits on a chariot.
part of me is wonders because I think he famously wanted to destroy all of his works, correct? I'm wondering whether he kind of knew the scholasticism that would arise from it, and that's one reason why he kind of wanted to get rid of it or not.
I think what happened to him is that he had a vision where he saw that everything he wrote was straw, but not in the sense that it was bad, in the sense that it's like, yeah, this doesn't explain the whole thing. It doesn't account for everything.
Yeah, so like that idea though is the problem of experience versus like academic or scholasticism. Because in scholasticism you take something and you define it, and then you create boundaries, and so you limit the experience. Whereas what you were saying, like when St. Thomas went out and like experienced the things of the world, and he came in and like wrote about those, there's like the fullness of it. But when you isolate it within just the boundaries of the books he wrote, you kind of miss all the spirituality of what he was communicating through the books. Does that make sense? It's kind of like this.
That's
what
why
happens is, like you're in books, and you just realize when you're living out, like there's so much out there that I just can't write about. So like everything I've wrote here just is nothing compared to like everything that's going out here.
When he spoke about psychology, like psychological treatments, he was like rooting it in actual experiences, you know. He'd be like, if you're sad, cry, you know, go with a friend, hang out with a friend, or contemplate the beautiful things of reality, you know, just go there and contemplate how reality is just beautiful, you know. And like, why did he say that? Why is it that somebody that is so highly intellectual can just go down and say something so grounded, so just go talk to a friend, dude? Like,
yeah, that's another thing that's so funny, is that like we almost are seeking permission to feel what we feel. Like if I'm feeling sad, I'll read like a self-help book about grieving or something instead of just grieving. Right? You're almost like seeking permission from another to like, is what I'm doing correct? Which is what's so
scholarly correct.
Yeah, it's like just interesting. Like even I think the writings of JP2, for example, of Theology of the Body is beautiful, but it's also come to a point where sometimes it's like, you know, there's almost like an effort by people while they're dating or experiencing, where they're like actively talking about it instead of just living that, if that makes sense. So, and then the other mysterious thing is, you know, I also listen to a lot of like Orthodox priests and things like that, and one of them is Lord of Spirits, and they had one episode where they talk about a body, or what body means. And what's interesting is they don't have, like obviously in their traditions, in their church, they don't have the theology of the body. But everything he talked about, just like naturally through scripture, he was describing the theology of the body. And it got me to think of, why was he able to naturally get that understanding through scripture? But like in the West, we need almost like someone to write for us, almost in the way where, because of, I don't know, maybe it's the disconnect we have through all the arts and stuff like that or whatever, where we just like, we read it and we completely miss the whole symbolism and stuff of body. Meanwhile, the Orthodox are doing it and they're just naturally getting to that point. And I'm not saying all laity and stuff like that get it, but at least from their spiritual leaders, it seems to just like naturally get to that point. this will be like my last question. So like, what do you think that is? Like, why does the West need a pope to release an encyclical or something about what body means, while Orthodox are just like, yeah, it says it in scripture, it's all right here.
Well, it's a funny thing that has to do with right and left. It has to do with center and margin. It has to do with all that symbolism, because you can think of the West is the there's another term is in, I don't know if it applied in English, but it's occidental. You have oriental from the east, and you have occidental from the west. And in the west can also be understood as poniente, which is where the sun sets, not where it rises, where it sets. That it makes it the marginal thing. We are at the edge. We are at the border of reality. And occidente sounds similar to accidente, accident, which in substance ontology is like the things that go out and touch with the outer things, relate to the outer things. It's not the essence of the thing. It's not the center of the thing. It's the margin of the thing, right? And we're pretty much like that. That's why the Roman Church and the Western Church united a lot with the Roman lex, with the law, with that kind of understanding, which is very related with the law, making the law very explicit, just making everything explicit, making everything outwardly, and just saying the thing and whatever, which is useful. It's useful, but if you lose, like if you have a schism, which is what we had, then you lose one of the sides. It's not that we don't have the center. We do have the center, I believe. That's why I remain Catholic. But the breaking apart into factions, right and left, and or Eastern and Western, doing this whole thing is just separating them and breaking them apart. You can see it within Catholicism, like with the Maronite tradition and the Catholic, the Eastern Catholics and whatever. You see a kind of disconnect that we have with them in their traditions and their understanding of reality that we didn't have, in medieval times. We didn't have that because it was a whole thing. It was a whole body with a right and a left, with right tendencies and left tendencies, and with centered tendencies and upward tendencies and lower tendencies. You had all the directions within the body of Christ, just good, like well oriented. That's why we have like so many traditions of interpretation. Now because we went so far into just being the West, being those people oriented in the law, positive law, just externalizing things, that we lose what's at the core of the thing. This is why I said at the beginning, we have to go back to nature. We need to go back to like essential things in practice, not just mentally. Because if not, then we're losing touch with so many things. And that's why like all the crazy things that happened after Vatican II, it's just showing how sick we are in the sense of disconnecting everything. We disconnect art and liturgy and liturgical calendars and traditions. It's just all disconnected. So it became very idiosyncratic. Every church has their own little idiosyncratic way of behaving, and it just scattered into just externalities, And like I said, I believe and I have hope that we can get back on track. But for that, I think we really need to get back to just nature. Like you said, plant a tree and you're going to understand a lot of biblical teachings, and wait, take the time and you're gonna see why is it a problem to rush things. When Eve just she just rushed into eating the fruits. Like, dude, chill out. You can live forever. Like, you're not getting it. You can live forever, and you can do whatever you want in this whole place. Chill out. Go discover what God has prepared for you. Why are you rushing into these things? But for that, we need to plant a tree. We have an apple tree in the back that we planted like 2 years ago. We don't have apples yet. We need to wait. It takes time. And if I contemplate that tree and then I go back and read the Bible, I'm going to be like, oh, that's why this happened. Yet, oh yeah, they were rushing it here. Oh, they didn't wait for the fruits, or they had bad fruits and they didn't care about the soil. So they didn't care about what was more important. That's why you have this analogy here, and that's why you have this reference here and this metaphor or whatever. But yeah, I believe we need to go back to, without losing high-level theology. I think that's a mistake. We should keep high-level theology and high-level metaphysics, all of that. But I think we should try to bridge it with just natural, simple living.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar. Dr. Ian McGilchrist, I think, has a book called The Master of His Emissary, which he talks about the difference between the left and right hemisphere of the brain. And he actually, it's interesting because it very much so replicates like the way the East and the Western churches interact, where I think it was the right hemisphere of your brain is very like open to generalities. It sees everything as a whole, and then your left brain is the one that usually gets tunnel vision, that just sees details and parts. And he's saying what happened in through our education system and things like that is that we rely too much on the left hemisphere in our brain, so we get tunnel vision of everything. And so when anything doesn't fit into that very specific category, we need to get rid of it. And what happens is the left hemisphere of the brain he describes as almost becoming like a tyrant and wanting to kill the right hemisphere of your brain because it's like too kind or compassionate or whatever, that it's not following the law. And so it's an interesting kind of like dynamic in some sense of exploring that even that system is almost like built into our very fabric of our like brain pattern of how it works. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I was talking with another symbolist recently. He came to visit me in Chile, and we went to some retreat. It's a Catholic retreat of medicine and actually experiencing the natural and all of that. And one guy was praying. One of the people there was praying, like, and he said, "Thank you, Lord, for the air. Thank you for your air that gives me life and gives me something that he said," but he connected air with spirit. So if you are the kind of person that you need precise, technical, scholarly language all the time, being make precisions, you should make precisions. You couldn't understand somebody that is generalizing and then moving into one aspect and then moving out and then speaking about actual air that is giving him actual like oxygen, and then he's extrapolating that immediately within the same prayer with the Holy Spirit, and it's your spirit that keeps me alive and blah blah. He was doing this prayer in which he would change from the natural aspect into the supernatural aspect with ease, and he didn't feel funny doing it, and we didn't feel funny listening to it, because we could see that he was just moving around the concept and just, yeah, that's fine. Like I don't have to take his speech and then go full on left hemisphere mode and just be like, okay, but when you said spirit here, you meant like the formal aspect, is the like the soul, is the, well, like, like, shut up, dude. You need to, chill out and be able to just take in the whole thing, and hold on to your faith. Just hold on to Christ and go for the ride, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, with that, Ignacio, I thank you very much for your time and having this conversation with me. It was a pleasure talking to you. There's 100 of other things that like I would love to talk to you about it, from like liturgy, how the way we worship to like other things. But I'm really glad that you touched on like the whole natural aspect, because I've been thinking the exact kind of I've been on that same thinking of that, how much we disconnect our own bodies and the natural world around us from our spiritual meaning. But if anyone's interested in, following Ignacio along, he is on X. If you want to follow him on there, I believe you said you have a YouTube channel, but it's in Spanish. So any
Yes.
listeners of the Spanish speakers here can also listen to Ignacio. Maybe you can understand his channel better. And then, is there anything else you would like to plug or end with?
No, I think I'm going to be doing more interviews speaking about symbolism and Catholicism, because I really think we need to. I really want to show that in Catholicism we have all that it takes. We just have the treasure hidden, and we should show it and
Yeah,
bring it
agreed.
out.